Welcome to the Invisible Cabaret Podcast. We are a cabaret troupe that focuses solely on stripping away the stigma surrounding mental health through variety entertainment, ranging from ballet and burlesque through to song and spoken word, and everything in between. During the pandemic, we've been working off stage to produce our podcast, taking the time to catch up with our friends and colleagues to talk about mental health, performance, the relationship between the two, and much more. If you're a creative who's got a story or two to share and would like to appear on our podcast, please do get in touch. We'd love to hear from you. Today, however, we're chatting with our wonderful troupe member, the incredibly talented and beautiful Blue Monday.
Yay!
Hello.
Hello.
It's lovely to have you.
It's lovely to be here.
Thank you for joining us. Blue Monday, also known as Erin, that's her muggle name. So we'll just kind of chop between the two. We'll occasionally call you Blue Monday and occasionally call you Erin, if that's okay with you.
Absolutely fine.
Wonderful. So I am Ferrero Rochelle, and as always, I'm joined by the wonderful Rosie Verbose.
Hello, thank you. It's lovely to be here.
So yes, we are joined by lovely Blue Monday, who has not always been known as Blue Monday whilst working with the cabaret. Once was known as Lago Lovelace. If you remember that, do you remember that? I had forgotten that until I started making notes.
I'd almost forgotten that. It's been a journey since then.
It really has. So what we normally do to start with is we talk about the evolution of your name. But with you, we're going to have to talk about the evolution of your names. So do you want to kick off? How did Lago Lovelace come to fruition?
Well, Lago Lovelace, half of the name is based off Ada Lovelace, who was actually one of the first women coders. Actually one of the first coders, full stop. And so a lot of my own personal work is creative coding, so using coding for artistic and creative purposes, and I really wanted that kind of an ode to her in there because she has been a really important figure for me as a woman in coding and just also for coding in general. So I chose that, and then because I'm very musical as well, I did a music degree and I've always played a lot of instruments. I just thought Lago Lovelace was alliteration, so it fitted well. I decided to change it because it had a connotation that I wasn't aware of, and not that it's necessarily bad. So I got a lot of questions about, is it after Linda Lovelace, who, if you don't know, is a famous porn star, famous for deep throating, which I'm sure you all know what that is, but so that was one of my reasons to change it. Yeah,
that's fair enough. It's like everyone's got their own thing in their own time, but you don't necessarily want that image straight off the bat, do you?
I don't think it was necessarily that was the particular catalyst. It was more that I found this new name and I thought that it was better suited to me, so then I swapped it. And I thought that was probably a good connotation to leave behind.
That's fair. That is fair. It's also nice because it means, for those who don't know, Blue Monday is it 6 weeks after Christmas? Something like that?
It's the third Monday of January.
Thank you.
And it is known as the most depressing day of the year, or the day in which people feel most depressed. And what a lot of people don't know, actually, there is nothing scientific in that at all. It was actually made by a holiday company trying to get people to buy tickets to go abroad, saying we feel so depressed now for how lovely you feel on holiday. And it's kind of just evolved into this really huge thing where it's just this huge PR stunt in this day in January where it says, you're so sad, come and buy all of our things so you won't feel sad anymore.
Amazing, isn't it?
Yeah.
Wow, another thing I did not know. I didn't know that. I didn't know it wasn't based in scientific fact.
No, it's not. Yeah, which is great because, you think, I originally thought that it was, scientific to begin with, and then it was, transformed into something else by corporations. But actually, the inception of this term is corporate. And I mean, at the end of the day, they don't care about your mental well-being. They only are using this to sell more products to you. And so just this day really stood out to me as something which is really poignant of that idea, and it kind of really shows how integral mental health is to companies in order to sell their products, but it also goes the other way around too. So I think often our mental health is directly affected by what we consume, because we're kind of caught in the cycle of consumerism and identifying ourselves through the things that we buy. And it's hard to get out of that, I think. And so a lot of my work has been focusing on mental health, but how the issues of capitalism and consumerism directly plays into that. So yeah, I think it sums me up as a good name. And also it has a nice ring to it as well. Aside from all its nasty connotations.
That is fantastic. I hadn't realised all of the different connotations that led into it, from its conception as a day, because that, you're so right, that really does speak to who you are as a performer and who you are as a creative, and actually ties in quite nicely to one of the acts that you created partly for the cabaret, but also for your degree, your master's, is that right?
Yes.
Do you want to talk a little bit about that? Because that piece has only been seen once at one event that we performed at. We've not seen it since, because I think you were still working on your masters at the time and kind of fine-tuning it a little bit. So do you want to go into a little bit about that?
So this piece was 2 years ago now, like 2 years ago pretty much to the month, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was, yeah.
So it's evolved a lot since then. So the concept of the piece came through this idea of how capitalism and consumerism related to emotional well-being. And so I did a bit of research on it, and I came across these studies about intrinsic and extrinsic goals. And so intrinsic goals are goals that we work towards that involve stuff like being part of a community, self-acceptance, learning to understand rather than to obtain more. And extrinsic goals are the opposites of that. So these are goals which operate in financial success, professional success, image, popularity, all those kind of things. And there are a lot of studies that have shown that people who live their life through extrinsic goals actually have lower levels of mental well-being and are more prone to developing mental health problems than people who live their life through intrinsic goals. Some of the evidence that supports this is actually really interesting. So this is a direct quote from a study about this that says recent work in the United States has suggested that some of the goals preferred by free market economy cultures as worthwhile are actually associated with lower levels of mental well-being when they are highly valued. So that's talking about extrinsic goals, financial success and professional success and image of popularity, and how when we feed into these goals, we're neglecting the things that actually make our brain happy. And this is such a multifaceted thing. So when I first started off this project, it was literally just about this intrinsic, extrinsic goals. We chase more products, we get further away from doing things that make us really happy. And then as I went into it, I realised how much actually surrounded this issue, how much of a huge problem it was in consumerism, even about identity, and how really under this postmodern world, which is led and operated by the mediation of images of what your life should be like and advertising, we've actually come to have so much less of a personal identity because we identify ourselves through the things that we buy and the things that we consume. And so Marx described advertising as a commodity fetishism, which mystifies and exaggerates product value, showing how advertising can dictate the way we operate our lives and the image of ourselves. So a classic example of this, I guess, is perfume adverts. And it seems so silly to me that people would advertise perfume because obviously you can't smell it over the screen.
Right, sure, yeah.
But it's because they're not advertising for the perfume, right? They're displaying an idea, aesthetic or a feeling which is seducing individuals into buying this kind of intangible concept or feeling which can never be delivered by the product. And that's how our kind of identity is replaced by this idea of who we want to be by the things that are offered to us to consume. And I think it's just got so deep into kind of postmodern theory of how our world operates now that it's so difficult to kind of separate our emotional well-being as we are to the things which govern our society. So the most recent development of this project is kind of looking at advertising throughout the ages and how deep this has come kind of post-World War II, and the different ideas which were advertised by each era. And how they've kind of had a part in dictating how we are as a society now. So it starts off with kind of, a montage of adverts and then goes through the 50s, the 80s, and then looking at the future but in relation to the past, so through cyberpunk, which is a really integral aesthetic of this idea, I think, about like making pastiches of the past to sell as products.
Yeah, like the glory of the 90s, the glory of the 50s, to then, use to sell further products.
Exactly, yeah. So, and it's like this empty shell of what the 80s were that's been kind of boiled down into this really condensed aesthetic, which is a kind of concept in itself that when we buy, we feed back into this cycle that we can't really escape from. And I think the quote that I put at the end of this piece really sums it up.
Can I ask a question, please?
Yes.
My hand is raised for listeners. How does one define cyberpunk, and is that something you are particularly passionate about?
So you would define cyberpunk as an aesthetic of a world which is controlled by corporations rather than by government, along with being very highly technical.
Okay.
So it comes into this idea that the corporation is king and the corporation controls your life, which is why, in all these, like, so for Blade Runner, example, a whole massive pillar point of the cyberpunk aesthetic is neon advertisements. But yeah, a low standard of living. So basically saying you come to the point where, corporations are controlling everything. And so this leads to people who are very poor and don't live well, essentially.
Right.
Because I think cyberpunk has kind of got to the point now where it is a very strong aesthetic visually, but I think conceptually is where we should really be looking at the values in the morals kind of behind why this started.
Yeah.
Cyberpunk actually came around by being inspired by the adverts of the 80s. So it was looking towards the future. If we carry on going as we are with this kind of mass commercial advertising, then where will this lead us? So that's why cyberpunk is often reminiscent of the 80s. It's a pastiche of the 80s because that's where it kind of came from. So actually, it's funny when you think about how we look towards the future is actually almost like looking into the past, because that genre is a pastiche boiled down version of what things were like then, but used to present what things might be like in the future.
That's freaking fascinating. So is it like the music equivalent of sci-fi, like 1984 and like Philip K. Dick and like Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, if we're talking about Blade Runner?
Well, that is so Philip K. Dick was a pioneer of cyberpunk, really. So yeah, it's the genre. It's as much a conceptual genre as a visual and audio genre. But I think the visuals and the audios are very strong. That it's become very popularized recently.
Ironic, no?
Yes, very definitely.
Yeah. If your identity is defined by being into cyberpunk, like, do you fall into a paradox? What happens?
Well, yeah, exactly. Because I mean, it's still, which I think is why it's so poignant as well. Because actually, in itself, the aesthetic is a paradox, isn't it? Because it's based off the dystopian ideals of consumerism, yet it's become so consumable.
One of the things I found most interesting about the piece when we worked on it was how many of those adverts from yesteryear talk about how buying this product will lead you to be happy. There was so many buzz phrases within those adverts. There was like a coffee, wasn't there? I seem to remember there was a coffee. Yes. It was like, oh yeah, if you drink this coffee, you're going to be happy. And like,
it was make your husband happy.
Make your husband happy!
Oh boy.
Yeah, so which is really fascinating as well, how advertising is also a tool which kind of reinforces like entrenched traditional gender roles and kind of societal ideas of like oppression and things for the time. So it's actually like a feedback loop between society and advertising, which reinforces these things and enables people to buy into them, but also keeps the social norms kind of stuck in a feedback loop, so preventing change.
I mean, it's terrifying.
Yeah,
a little bit.
It's damn scary.
It's also terrifying as well because, I mean, all these ideals you're talking about resonate completely thoroughly with me. And then I'm like, I have to get a job because I need money to buy food. And I have ended up working in marketing. I've found it really difficult to make anything genuine or authentic, because even when I'm genuinely caring about what I'm marketing, I still feel like at the end of the day, I'm only trying to get somebody to buy a thing, you know? And it feels very hollow, and yet it's a necessary part of our functioning society as it is.
Oh, exactly. Which I think is why it's so hard to break out of the cycle. When people talk about communist dictatorships, it's always the regime, as in it's us and them. But with capitalism, you can criticise capitalism, you know, till the cows come home, but yet you're still partaking in capitalism, you know, you're still perpetuating the cycle. And it's really, really difficult because you have to. I mean, you're forced to. That's kind of the tenets of capitalism, that you are bound to live by these kind of consumer morals, and Absolutely. If you don't, then you can't afford to survive. The only thing you can do sometimes is just critique and do your best. I guess we're kind of waiting for the whole economic system to be overhauled.
Yeah,
but until
maybe
then,
next year.
Yeah. So yeah, it is a complete predicament, because obviously even critiquing these things, you are complicit in them and you make them worse, and it's very hypocritical. I mean, even doing all the art and the videos that I did for this project were all done on my MacBook. You know, you can just see the hypocrisy in that in itself, but it's really hard.
And also, like, if you keep critiquing, at some point you're going to end up falling down a very deep hole that you can't get out of. Because if your brain's anything like mine, I'm like the kid that's always like, why? You know? Yeah. And I will never turn off.
Yeah.
And then all that's going to do is just make your mental health worse.
Yeah. How do you cope with that, Erin?
Well, actually, I think since I got so into postmodern theory and Marxist theory, I've really been inspired to try and make as many small changes in my life that enable me to kind of, I know I'm always aware that I'm still living within the system, but kind of at least putting myself onto the outskirts of it. And this is a thing I see quite a lot in, obviously, the younger generations, especially Gen Z, like, you know, really, really thinking about how they can put themselves on the edge of a system rather than slap bang in the middle of it. So, for example, even with stuff like clothes, I used to buy just from charity shops, but then I don't really do that anymore just because I'm aware of the kind of gentrification that surrounds that. So I try to make my own clothes now and not buy anything.
Do you?
Yeah.
I did not know that. Mm-hmm. How did you learn that?
Well, I've been sewing ever since I was younger, but especially since lockdown started, I've got a lot more into it. So I guess it's nicer to make, you know, better choices for yourself personally, and how you can distance yourself from something which you know is really trying to batter down your mental health in order to turn over a profit. But I mean, even doing that, you're still complicit in society. I mean, there is just, I mean, it's the classic quote, isn't it, that there is no ethical consumption under capitalism, but there really isn't. I mean, even if you buy fabric to make your own clothes, like 90% of the fabric in the world is made with slave labour, pretty much. There's just no escaping the system, but at least you can, you know, try and make some informed choices to distance yourself in order to give yourself some kind of respite from it.
Yeah. Basically just being less awful.
Less awful, still dreadful.
It's similar to the conversation on environmentalism as well, isn't it? You know, all you've got to do is, well, in most of the issues in the world, all you can do is try your best and try and be kind and
make the small changes.
Yeah, make the small changes and do whatever you can that also doesn't impact your mental health. And
to balance.
It really is. And it's so difficult. It's such a fine line to walk. So it's completely understandable that people can fall into, you know, really difficult times when trying to weigh up all of these things. It reminds me of Izzy's piece with the figs. Because it's not just about the different careers, it's about all of the different things you can do in the world and the different things you have to worry about. And if you focus too much on one fig, then the other figs can wither and die. And, you know, trying to collect all of them is very difficult as well. You know, it's being a human, it's hard.
It is hard.
Isn't it? It's so hard.
They don't tell you that. they do not prepare you.
As you know, times are not easy for the starving cabaret artiste. That's why we're so thankful for Anchor. With Anchor, setting up the Invisible Cabaret podcast has been a breeze, leaving us more time to focus on the fun things like our next creative projects and where our next meal is coming from. Anchor will distribute your podcast for you, so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and many more platforms besides. There's creation tools in-app that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. It's everything you need to make a podcast all in one place. And, starving artists, listen up, Anchor even provides you with the opportunity to make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. And the best bit? It's completely free. Maximise your creativity with minimum fuss. Download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started and live your best podcast life. Happy creating. We now return you to your scheduled programming.
What else have you been doing, Erin, in lockdown or otherwise, to because obviously you are an incredibly smart human with lots of very deep thoughts, which is a blessing and a curse. So how do you keep that in check, and what do you do when it starts overrunning you?
So, yeah, I think a lot, and my thoughts do have the tendency to run a bit wild, which is why I have to be busy literally all the time. I cannot sit down and watch TV or watch a film. I just can't. It's just not in my nature to do that. So I've just found that the hobbies that I try and do, I've really been trying to distance myself from a lot of reading things that I would usually do, and just kind of do more stuff with my hands in lockdown, and really try and just feel a little bit closer to the earth and just kind of get a bit more present, back in my body type feeling. So I've been doing a lot of baking, a lot of making bread and shortbread and growing stuff on my balcony, which has really helped.
So lovely.
And I think just this kind of space, and I mean, obviously I can't speak for everyone because I know lockdown has been hard on people in a multitude of ways. But for me, I've really come to appreciate that this is the only time where I can live just simply and slowly, at least, until I drastically change my life. So I've been really trying to use that for good. So really making an effort to kind of change the way that I think and, just live my life the way I do different things. Just live a bit more simply, I think, is what I've been trying to do. And it seems to have worked. I mean, I came off my medication about 2 months ago. So I am
med-free. Goodness, congratulations.
That's wonderful news. Well done.
But yeah, I feel really great, and it's really helped just kind of get me out of my head by doing lots of things that I can just be happy with.
That's amazing. Can I temper that congratulations just by note to listeners? If you are on medication for your mental health, there is zero shame in that.
Oh, definitely.
The congratulations is more for the fact that I know that for you, Erin, especially, that represents something that you wanted to be med-free. And also represents a lot of hard work. Overhauling the way you think is no easy task. So it's many things to congratulate from your sort of intrinsic goal perspective.
Well, yeah, I guess it comes back to that, doesn't it? I've been trying to live intrinsically rather than extrinsically. And I think, it's just really helped not putting myself under so much pressure to do things. Or, I mean, I haven't made any art since lockdown, and I actually think that's been a good thing for me because it means that I don't kind of overrun myself with conceptual thoughts, and especially when I don't really have anyone to bounce it off of in lockdown. At the beginning I was just getting very caught up in things, and I think as part of my obsessive compulsive disorder I do have the tendency to get very obsessed with things. And so actually stepping back from the things that I do professionally, even though I love them so much, has been really good for me.
So much self-determination and willpower in that.
It fills me with joy. You look glowing as well.
Oh, yeah, you do. Thank you. I think it's just the sweat.
Possibly, yes. I'm not going to lie, that is highly probable. But no, it's wonderful to hear you speak this way. I think it's, well done. So proud.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, it's wicked, dude.
And it's one of the things that we said early on in the podcast is, for some people, making art, and you know, in a contrast almost to what we spoke about in our episode with Mouncelot, in that for some people using art to battle demons and also to process things is so helpful and so worthwhile. And during lockdown, especially at the beginning, there was, you know, so much pressure from so many places, mainly social media, being like, this is your time to do stuff, this is your time to make stuff, and if you're not making stuff,
6 more languages.
yeah, what's your excuse? And what was it? Oh god, it was my least favorite thing. It was if you haven't managed to tick something off your list during this time, then you never lacked time, you only lacked discipline. And I was like, ugh.
So gross.
Yeah.
So gross, so gross.
Yeah. Vom all over it and throw it in the bin.
Because some people did, like, I saw, I think I said this in one of the older podcasts, but I saw someone say on Instagram that it hurt them to make art during this time. You know, it was actually painful. And, you know, because you know that you're so passionate about what you do, there's no harm in taking some time away from it. And like you said, it can even be cleansing. It can even be a good thing to get yourself away from it and to get yourself away from overthinking, thinking through all of these processes. So yeah, well done, Erin.
100%.
Thank you.
You're also, I think, the first person that we have talked to on the podcast so far who has actually chosen to not make anything. So represent, because we've had, you know, Steph talking about trying to take classes and balance that, and Izzy talking about making stuff, and so it's very interesting. We've had a spectrum of attitudes to that, I guess, already.
Yeah, I think when I make art, a lot of it is kind of built into this image of myself where everything has to be perfect. I have like overly high expectations for myself, and I'm still trying to free myself from that mindset. So not having the pressure on to actually really do anything has been really good. And it has inspired creativity in other ways. So I've said I've been baking lots, developing like just little recipes, but that hasn't been for anything. It's just been literally just because I want to.
The joy of it, yeah.
Yeah, and I think a lot of the time when I do create art, it doesn't come from a want of just because I want to do it in the moment. Then it's like because I really want to show something.
Yeah.
And so because I'm trying to show this idea, it therefore has to be perfect. And so I hold myself to a very high standard, and then it just stresses me out a lot on top of all the kind of content I already have to think about around these issues, because obviously they're very complex.
Absolutely.
But yeah, I've enjoyed not doing much, but still doing
good for you.
Much,
yes.
but not much in a way.
Yes, a different kind of much. Mm-hmm. We're redefining much.
Yes.
Yeah.
I like that.
We need that embroidered on t-shirts, Steph.
Yes.
Well, this leads in beautifully to our final segment, which we do every episode, which is what are you grateful for this week? We like to do it because there's always hope to be found in one thing you're grateful for.
So, Ros, what are you grateful for this week?
I'm so glad you asked. So I am grateful for, it's a tiny thing. Sometimes we're profound, sometimes it's tiny. My tiny thing this week is wheat-free bread. I have finally, after many years of quite a sad gluten loss journey, I have finally found the most delightful cob bread I have not had the discipline to make my own bread, and you know what, I'm not going to beat myself up for it. I've found a nice bread that I like. I am willing to pay the extra 50p or whatever so that I have toast that tastes like toast for the first time in maybe 7 years. And I love toast.
Oh, it's so good, so underrated.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's my gratitude for this week.
Fantastic. I'm so happy for you. I know
thanks,
this has
man.
been a
Thanks.
journey.
It really has. It really has. Thank you for being here and supporting me through it. It's been tough times.
Oh, no, but seriously, there's nothing can beat a good slice of buttered toast.
It's true.
Or any other kind of toast. In fact, I think most of my body is made up of bread. So I think to find a bread that can serve you well, that's goals. So well done.
Thank you so much. Yeah. What are you grateful for, Ferrero Rochelle?
I'm going to take a slightly more serious turn here. It's not
You are
anything to do
allowed.
with bread. This week, I have met up with a couple of friends for the first time in a while, and we got into a bit of a DMC one night, and we started talking about different kinds of romantic relationships that we've all been in, and it very quickly kind of shifted to my friends' experiences in very toxic relationships, and also further friends that I was not aware of, but I have now learnt of, that are in very difficult domestic situations. So the thing I am grateful for is that I'm in a very happy and stable home. I feel very safe, and I never have to think about mental abuse or physical abuse in my home. That's not something that even I would even think about for a second. However, I know that the case is not the same in so many houses across the country, especially in lockdown. I feel like it's possibly something we've talked about before, but I just wanted to speak about it right now because it's been really pressing heavy on my heart for the past few nights, just thinking about how grateful and how lucky I feel to feel safe in my own home. And basically, I just wanted to flag up if there is anybody out there listening who knows of someone who is in an unsafe situation, or is themselves in an unsafe situation, that there are things you can do, there are places you can go, and it's not always physical abuse. That was the one thing that we talked about quite a lot with my friends, is talking about the toll that mental abuse can take on a relationship and take on a person in general. So we'll put some links to some resources in the description at the bottom. The main place is the National Domestic Abuse Helpline. Their website is incredible. There's a quick button that you can just go to that will immediately call for you. There's a quick exit button if you're in an unsafe situation, you're looking on your phone, for example, and you are frightened that someone could see, or that it could be dangerous for you to be looking at that website. You've got a quick release button where you can exit really quickly. If you're worried about someone sharing your connection and seeing what you're looking at, there's also ways to get around that, and they give you guidance on how to do that. There's also support on that website to support a friend or a family member who's in a situation and you don't know what to do. They have a chat option as well. It really is a great website. So we'll put a link to that website, and then there's also the government website that has a list of resources. So there's specific sites for LGBTQ people, there are specific sites for Scotland, and all other kinds of sites specific to location and situation. So I just thought it was really important to flag, because it turns out there's a lot of people who are struggling with this kind of situation, and I think some people wouldn't even consider their situation to be one of domestic abuse if it is mental abuse. And gaslighting is now an illegal act. It is an act of domestic abuse. So if you're unsure, definitely have a look at some of these websites and see if you can connect those dots, and yeah, that would be my thing to say.
That was great, Rosh, and extremely important. So thank you for flagging it up.
That's all right.
And as you say, we'll pop all the resources will be in the bottom of any of our platforms via Anchor, so iTunes or Google Podcasts. We also will be uploading this as a waveform video on YouTube, and the links will be in the description there as well. That was very important. Finally, Erin, what are you grateful for?
Not just this week, but in general, it is just literally the ability to enjoy small things, I think.
Oh, amen.
Yes.
And our audience shout out this week goes to Alex, who is grateful for fans. Which I think is something we can all, as in like the air conditioning.
The whirring kind, or of the
The whirring kind, not the Lonely Hams kind. Yes,
okay.
Absolutely.
Cool.
Yes. That was worth clarifying.
Yeah.
But we're with you on that. We like whirring fans also. Erin, thank you so much for joining us today. I feel like we have barely scratched the surface of all the things we could chat about, so maybe you will grace us with your presence again. Would that be all right?
Yes, I'd love to. Thank you for having me.
Oh, good. Not at all. Is there anything that you would like to plug or give a shout out to while you're here before we go?
No, like I said, I've been a bit of a recluse in lockdown, trying to distance myself, so no.
Any recipe recommendations? Anything of that nature?
I'd recommend everyone to make a baby tomato and rosemary focaccia, because that is very tasty.
Where can we find the recipe?
Well, I was just thinking, perhaps, Erin, if it's not a family secret, we could pop your recipe on the blog.
Of course.
On our website.
Yes, I will send it over.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Erin. Ferrero Rochelle, signing off.
Goodbye. Thank you for listening.
Goodbye.
I'm so hot. I can't even function anymore.
Let's all go have a nice cold bath separately and think of England. All right, thank you so much, everyone. If you'd like to get in touch with us, then you can email, you can message, you can DM. As Rochelle said at the beginning, if you'd like to be involved in the podcast, or indeed if you'd like to say what you're grateful for, and we'll give you a shout out on the next one. And we'll see you soon. Stay cool.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.